What he actually said in that tape was he called upon Iraqi Muslims who supported him to join with socialists in the future battle against the American Crusaders. These are his words. Socialists, he meant the Ba'ath Party. He meant the soldiers of the Iran-Iraq War, the soldiers of the Iraqi army. This was the detonator, which was going to bring us the suicide bomber and the trained Iraqi soldier in one insurgency. This was the warning, and none of us... How many people here actually read that at the time? There's one hand, two hands. I missed it, 3 hands. Okay, you 3 did better than I did. I was sitting in Baghdad at the time. How incredible. There it was, and we didn't pick it up. No wonder Mr. Zarqawi has such good intelligence. But let me read you the rest of this report, just bits of it, and you mustn't laugh. I'm going to read you the sourcing of the report. Paragraph 1, as you know, US authorities say. Column 1 still, US officials said. Said one US Justice Department counterterrorism official. Column 2, officials said, US authorities say, US officials said. We're going over to B, A10 page now, so you can look it up on the Google, which I don't use. Here we go. Column 1, several US officials said, those officials said, the officials confirmed, American officials complained, they said, US officials stressed. Column 3, US authorities believe, said one senior US intelligence official. US officials said. Jordanian officials said. We've got a slight... No laughter, please. We haven't finished yet. Several US officials said. Column 4, US officials said. Several American officials said. Officials say US officials, but US officials said. One US counterterrorism official said. I'm not joking. There it is. That is the journalism you're getting fed. And I sometimes think the LA Times and the New York Times should be called American Officials Say. And we can cut out... and we can cut out the journalists. No more problems. But it isn't the only kind of reporting I object to. Let me try this one on you. This is an AP report published in the New York Times on the 24th of January, not long ago, also, of course, on Fox News. I'll read you just a few extracts from here and see if you can spot the point. You will. Fort Carson, Colorado, January 23, the Associated Press. A military jury ordered a reprimand, but no jail time Monday, for an army interrogator convicted of negligent homicide in the death of an Iraqi general who died after he stuffed him headfirst into a sleeping bag and sat on his chest. The interrogator, Chief Warrant Officer Louis Welshofer Jr., also was ordered to forfeit $6,000 in salary and largely restricted to his barracks and workplace for 60 days. Way down the story, in paragraph 6, we learn that the Iraqi general is actually Major General Abed Hamad Malhoush. He has an identity in paragraph 6. Until then, none at all. Here we go. Earlier in the day, during the sentencing hearing, Mr. Welshofer fought back tears. I deeply apologize, he said, if my actions tarnished the soldiers serving in Iraq. One would have thought the apologies might have gone to the family of the general, if he has one. But we don't know that. What we do know is that Mr. Welshofer has a family because, as we learn later on in the story, his wife Barbara testified that she was worried about providing for their 3 children if her husband was sentenced to prison. But she said she was proud of him for contesting the case. I love him more for fighting this, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. Everybody's crying in this court case. He's always said that you need to do the right thing, and sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to do. Torture is tough, ladies and gentlemen, believe me. So here we have, oh, there's another lovely line here I better tell you, is that they believed, here we are, officials believed, the officials are here too, officials believed Malhoush, the general, had information that would break the back of the whole insurgency. He knew 40,000 insurgents, so they stuffed him inside a sleeping bag and sat on his chest. But what's really wrong with this story is, did the general not have a family? Did he not have 3 children? Who was providing for them now? But it's missing. And I don't think the reporter who wrote this AP story for a single moment saw anything wrong in it. Shouldn't we know that this person was also a human being? This is exactly the same problem that we have because in our reporting of Iraq today, because I don't think we care about Iraqis. In fact, I don't think we care about many people in the Middle East. You know, why is it that President Bush can say, 30,000 Iraqis have been killed, more or less, which? Would he have said, well, 2,000 Americans have been killed, more or less? I doubt it. We rightly honour the sacrifice of our dead soldiers, but we do not give any honour to the massive suffering of the Iraqis. In August of last year, I went, as I often do, to the main mortuary in Baghdad to count corpses. There were 9 by 9 a.m., 26 by midday. Many of them hands tied behind their backs, blindfolded, a woman and baby included, shot in the head. Death squads are roaming Baghdad, as we now know. When I was there, the mortuary officials, who know me very well by now, allowed Mr. Bob to have a look at the computer screen hooked into the Ministry of Health in Baghdad, which is banned, of course, to Western journalists on the orders, specifically of the American and British occupying powers. And this computer showed that in July alone, 1,100 Iraqis, in just July, in only Baghdad, had died by violence. Now, you spread that through Mosul, Kirkuk, Erbil to some extent, Bakuba, Ramadi, Fallujah, Amara, Samara, Najaf, Karbala, Basra. You must be talking of 3,000 a month, 36,000 a year, not 30,000 more or less since April of 2003. That 100,000 figure that my own dear Prime Minister, Tony Blair, made fun of may well be quite conservative, but we don't care about the Iraqis. We don't care about their suffering. It's always, oh, the lowest months so far for American casualties. Well, good, but the highest month so far for the Iraqis is not the headline. It's very odd the way in which this constant pitter-patter of our concern for our blue-eyed friends only comes through in this narrative. I'll give you another example of this kind of journalism that makes me gulp. Here is the Associated Press doing its job. The AP, through the Freedom of Information Act, and I wish ours worked as well as yours did, by the way, got 6,000 documents, official American government documents from Guantanamo. Here's, Fisk is doing his, wandering odyssey again. The Sydney Morning Herald turns up at my breakfast table in Australia. US papers tell Guantanamo inmate stories. Well, yeah, that's okay, that's what it's about. But the real story is buried in the box. Here is a quote. This is, remember, an official American document. This is a quote about the trial in the drumhead military courts of Feroz Ali Abbasi. He's a Brit, actually, who's since been released and complained about torture in Guantanamo. And Abbasi, according to this official American document, stands in court and says, please tell me what I'm accused of. Under international law, I have the right to know. And here is the quote from the Air Force colonel who was the judge at this Guantanamo mock trial, and who I think does not deserve to wear his uniform, who said, Mr. Abbasi, your conduct is unacceptable, and this is your absolute final warning. I do not care about international law. I do not want to hear the words international law again. We are not concerned about international law. Yeah, and it's way down the story. No wonder you didn't all read it. That surely should be the headline, I ask myself. On the 11th of September 2001, I was crossing the Atlantic towards you. When my plane took off from Europe, I'd already heard from my office that one aircraft, we thought it was a light aircraft, had flown into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Once I was in the air, I called up my office on the satellite planes phone in my seat, which proves I was traveling business class, doesn't it? Anyway, I talked to London, and they said it's an airliner, and there's another one. So I thought, this isn't a tragedy, this is an attack. And then we heard a helicopter at the Pentagon, which turned into another airliner, then we had Pennsylvania. And I went up, because I know many of the crews, because I travel the Atlantic so many times, I went up to the chief person, the stewardess, and said, look, you better tell our captain, I knew him actually, that America is under attack. And the pilot came straight back. I said, Robert, call London, tell me everything more you can learn. I did. And the stewardess said to me, you know, there must have been a lot of them. It's unprecedented. She said, where did the planes come from? At that stage, we didn't know that they were domestic, fully fueled flights. We thought they could have come from Latin America or Africa or Europe. And the purser and I looked at each other. And we went round our aircraft looking for passengers we didn't like. I found 13. 3 in business class. He found 14. And of course, they were the same ones. They were Muslims, weren't they? and we picked them out because they had worry beads or beards or were looking suspiciously at Bob because he was looking suspiciously at them, or were doing the dastardly sin of reading the Quran, you know, on a flight. And I got back to the front of the aircraft and I realized that in 3 minutes, bin Laden, and I was sure it was him, had turned nice, friendly, liberal Bob into a racist. I was racially profiling the passengers on my aircraft, wasn't I? He was not dividing Muslims from the West. We don't say Muslims from Christians because we don't have so many Christians left now, but Muslims. He was dividing the innocent from the innocent. And all it needed to solidify that vengeful theory and to open the gates to torture and rendition and abuse and murder was for one person to say, September the 11th, 2001 has changed the world. And we all know who said that. And indeed, so did Mr. Blair. What was very interesting, however, was when I got back to Europe again, turned on the television, that my phone was ringing like a budgerigar mobile phone from NBC, CBS, CNN. All they wanted to know was who, was it bin Laden and how? Okay, who? 19 Arabs who claimed they were Muslims. How? Box cutters, aeroplanes, tall buildings. One question they did not want to ask was why. And from my aircraft, I actually dictated 2 stories to London before it returned. Of course, we turned round off the west coast of Ireland when America closed its airspace. I dictated 2 reports to my paper. One was saying that in the coming days we will not be permitted to ask why, because it will open a door to the Sykes-Picot Agreement, to the Balfour Declaration, to Lawrence of Arabia, to the aftermath of the First World War, and on and so forth. And the other article I wrote was saying, I don't believe in pointing the finger, but when there is an attack on this scale, and this was, after all, an international crime against humanity, we have a right to say who has declared war on the United States, and bin Laden had. And the last time I met him, out of 3 occasions, the last words he said to me, we were sitting in one of his camps on the top of a mountain in Afghanistan, a camp originally built by the CIA, of course, and he said, Mr. Robert, from this mountain upon which you're sitting, we defeated the Russian army and destroyed the Soviet Union. Bit of an exaggeration, but with a certain amount of truth in there. Then he said, and I pray to God that he permits us to turn America into a shadow of itself. And when Victoria, my researcher, found my notebook, along with 328,000 other documents, files, newspaper clippings, photographs and videotapes, she found that on the side of that quote, I'd written 2 vertical lines on each side of the page and put rhetoric, question mark. And I can tell you, when I saw on the television over and over again the Twin Towers descending in that biblical epic horror and all that smoke and fire crossing Manhattan, I said to myself, well, New York is now a shadow of itself. But what was particularly interesting was the venom that I received, both on the BBC and on the radio stations, when I did start to say why. I was on an Irish radio show with Eamon Dunphy when I was hooked into a well-known Harvard professor who shall remain nameless. It was Alan Dershowitz, of course it was, yes. Who said that because I was asking the question why, I was pro-terrorist, anti-American, that I was a dangerous man, and that to be anti-American was the same as being anti-Semitic. I've got it on tape, by the way. But you see, I got the message. To ask the question why was so dangerous that you would be a Nazi if you asked it. Indeed, following my articles, I started receiving a number of postcards from this country, all written with the same language, of course, in different places, saying that my mother was Adolf Eichmann's daughter. Now, my mum was in the Royal Air Force in 1940, repairing radios on damaged Spitfires that had been shot down by the Luftwaffe. But that, of course, didn't matter. We actually had a series of campaign emails into the Independent in London. We don't care about, if it's a political campaign, we bin them. Your papers don't, unfortunately. You take them seriously. One lovely one came in from Texas saying, after reading Robert Fisk's bilge, I will never buy your magazine again. Now, not only do we, alas, not sell in Texas, we certainly are a newspaper, not a magazine, but you get the general drift. But you see, some of us did have a feeling that something was coming. I've gone back, with Victoria's help, through all the videotaped interviews I was doing prior to 2001, 9/11. And one of the most interesting moments comes in a CBC interview in Toronto when I said I'm very pessimistic